We are in our Get It Together series where we are learning how to make decisions and take positive actions in our lives, okay? The essence of the series is challenging how we do things, building the framework, and putting the focus into those areas of our lives that we need to put in so that we can get stuff done, get it together, figure it out, draw closer to God, and draw closer to His plans for our lives, okay? So here's the phrase. You ready? All week, God's given me this phrase, and it's a very simple phrase, 2 words. The phrase was, look again. Look again. If I were to come to you, Raquel, and I'd say, look again, what does that mean to you, that phrase, look again? That was a tough one. It's not as easy as get it together.
It could be so many different
It's not as easy
ways.
as what you thinking, you know?
Maybe it's something where, like, you see something, maybe it doesn't look like what you thought it was. And God's like, look again. There's more to it. Or maybe it looked like there wasn't enough, but maybe it was.
Keep going.
That's all I got.
That's all you got. All right, cool. That's I was like, man, maybe you could preach today. Let's go. When we talk about look again, guys, really we're talking about reassessing. We're talking about reevaluating, right? We're talking about examining or reconsidering. Look again, like maybe you missed something, right? How many guys can realize that many of us have missed an opportunity because we've thought we've missed the mark? Or we missed an opportunity because we didn't look again to see where it was. I have this saying in my house, okay, and you guys feel free to take it for you, which causes strife every now and then because people don't want to hear it, but it's the reality, okay? The saying is, if you're looking for something, okay, not look again, that would be too easy, right? But if you're looking for something, how many of us have ever lost your keys, lost your phone, lost anything, lost a child, lost a dog, something, right? She's like, my hands are up. No, I never lost my child. No, okay. No, I'm sorry. I just suckered you in on that one. Sorry. All right, so hopefully you never lost a child because that would be a bad situation. But regardless, what I'm trying to say here is how many of us, you've lost something, right? And until you find it, guess where it can be? Anywhere, right? And so in my house, when somebody loses something, I tell them, keep looking. I say, why are you looking there? Because you haven't found it yet. But I wasn't even in that area. But until we find it, it can be anywhere. How many of you guys understand that? Sometimes we've just got to learn to look around, continue to look, continue to reassess, because until we find what we need to find, it could be anywhere. Turn to the person next to you and say, look again. You got to look again. You got to take a second look. You got to look again at your situation. If you were going to get it together in areas of your life, you have to look again. And too many of us, because we don't want to face the truth again, we don't want to face the reality of our present situation, we don't look again, and therefore we don't get it together, because if we looked again, we might figure out that maybe things were already becoming better, or maybe things were already getting resolved. Look again. Look again. So I want you guys, we're going to go to story time with Pastor JJ this morning, okay? Because I'm going to read like a whole verse for you guys, but I want you guys to, if you're taking notes, take this down. We'll put it up on the screen for you, but I'm going to read from 2 Kings chapter 6 and 2 Kings chapter 7, because we just got to go through this story, okay? We're just going to go through this whole story, so you guys got to bear with me. I'm going to read, a lot of Bible here for you guys. Amen? So let's just jump right into it. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 24 and 33. Let me give you the context. The people of Israel were under attack. Okay, they're at Samaria and they're under attack. Have you guys seen those old style movies where like they're in like not old style, but like medieval movies where they're locked up in the fortress and the army's coming against the fortress or this gated city, and one of the strategies to beat the people in the city is to starve them out, right? You don't let them out the gate. You guys got all the hunting grounds behind you. You starve them out, and you win, yes? And then once you got them starved out sufficiently, you take over. That's what's going on in the context that we're going to read. You have to understand this. The situation was really bad for the people of Israel. Okay, it was so bad, and there was no food, there was hunger. Let's jump into it. So sometime later, here's the start of it. Ben-Hadad, king of Aram was the Aramites. They were enemies of the people of Israel. He mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid siege to Samaria. There was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long, and you might not understand this part, but that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver and a quarter of a cab of seed pods for 5 shekels. Let me give you context. How many of you guys understand that there's not a lot of meat on a donkey's head? Okay, and it was about roughly $600 for the price of that donkey's head. So it was like $600 for like no meat. Okay, and then it was about $60 in this context for 5 plant seeds. How many understands that's kind of problematic because you can't eat the plant seed. You still got to plant the seed, but it was about $60. Why? Because there was no food. Okay, and the food that was there, you couldn't get a hold of it. It's kind of like toilet paper in the middle of quarantine. You know what I'm saying? No matter where you looked, you just couldn't find it. Did anybody ever run out of toilet paper during quarantine? I'm just curious. Thank goodness no, because you would have been stuck. It would have been a problem, right? So you would have figured out a way, though, I guarantee you. Stay throughout this message, right? The prices were through the roof. There was no food anywhere. Things were really, really bad, okay? And so the king of Israel, who is getting attacked, we got to understand it. Use your imagination here. Get the context. The king of Israel, him and his people, they're getting attacked, and they're starving. If you continue to read, I mean, they were having to kill children. This was a bad situation, okay? While Elijah, so because the king sends a message to Elijah, so while Elijah was still talking to his people, the messenger that the king sent came down to him, and the king said, "This disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" We're going to come back to that. What was the king's response? Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? We're going to come back to that. Elijah replied, "Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." Just to give you context here. What he said, I already gave you the price. The food is too expensive. Things are going to come back to normal. That's what he's saying. Okay, he's basically saying what was once 5 seeds of a plant for $60 is now going to be a whole 5-gallon bucket of seeds for about $6, $7. Like things are going to be good again. Like he's going to reverse this miraculously tomorrow. When was he going to do it? Tomorrow. So the man of God speaks. He says, tomorrow things are going to turn around. I have a question for you guys today. How often are you willing to wait for tomorrow for things to turn around? The reality is most of us want it to happen today. And when it doesn't happen today, we start acting like it's never going to happen. Once again, and you've heard this in this past series, we start judging our today and our tomorrow by our yesterday, and we forget that God is still moving. We forgot. It's like all of a sudden we start acting a fool. God healed you. He restored you, brought you back together. He didn't abandon you when your finances were down. And now he's telling you your finances might be down again. But guess what? Tomorrow the economy is going to be restored. But we're not willing to wait for tomorrow. I can't go down too far. The officer on whose arm the king was leaning said to the man of God, "Look, even if the Lord should open up the floodgates of heaven, could this even happen?" So the officer who the king had the king's ear, he's straight doubting. You guys see that? He had no faith, just straight doubting. Could it even happen? Now, mind you, these were the people of Israel. These were people who knew God. You understand the context? This is not some non-believer who doesn't know the power of God. They had already been set free. They knew the stories of the people, the Israelites being set free from captivity. These are stories they talked about, celebrated every single year. They knew that God had power, but all of a sudden he's like, look, I hear you, man of God. But even if God opened up the floodgates, could that even happen? Straight doubting. So Elijah says to him, "You will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of it." Fast forward, we learn out the dude died, but whatever. All right, so now here's more of the story. Stay with me, story time with Pastor JJ. So now, the lepers. I want to introduce you to 3 groups of people. I like looking at the people in each story. 3 groups of people. We're going to call them the doubters, which we just saw, the king and the official, the hopeless and the clueless. Okay, which one are you? The doubter, the hopeless, or the clueless? You ready? Don't get uncomfortable. Why are you looking uncomfortable? I don't want to know which one I am. It's part of the problem. We don't want to look again. We don't want to look at our own condition. Are you the doubter? Are you the hopeless? Or are you the clueless? So let's look at the hopeless. At that same time, now there were 4 men with leprosy. Okay, and if you guys know anything about leprosy, which I'm sure you do at this point, leprosy was a skin condition. They had to be isolated from everybody else back in those days. You couldn't have family contact. You had to be outside the city walls, like you're sleeping outside the community, right? Couldn't be with anybody. So now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They were isolated. They said to each other, what was going on? There was a famine, right? They said to each other, why stay here until we die? The people in the city ain't got no food. We ain't got no food. We ain't even in the city. Why stay here until we die? Look what they say. If we say we'll go into the city, the famine's there, and we'll die. And if we stay here, guess what? We're going to die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans. That was the army that was coming against Israel, that was starving them out. You got it? Let's go over there, and let's just surrender. Like, what else we got to lose? We want to be with our people, but if we go there, we're going to die. There's no food. If we stay here, we're going to die. But if we go there, let's just surrender. And look what they say. If they spare us, guess what? We live. And if they kill us, guess what? We die. If you look at the odds here, like 75% chance they die. Like 3 out of the 4 possible scenarios is not going to work. But there was a 25% chance that says, hey, we got nothing to lose here. So they had a choice. They could have stayed where they were, or they could have looked again. What did they do? They looked again. They analyzed their odds. It says, man, everything looks like it's against us, but we got a 25% chance of victory. I'll take those odds. How many of you guys have given up because it looks like 75% chance of defeat versus 25% chance of victory? How many of you guys understand? Those odds don't look too good. But too often, when the odds are not in our favor, we choose not to look again, and we choose to give in to this current situation that we're in. They had nothing else to lose, so what did they do? Verse 5, at dusk they got up and they went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. And here's why. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army. So the army that was against Israel, they began to say to one another, look, the king of Israel has hired Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us. So they got up and they fled in the dusk, and they abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. Did you guys see what happened here? These people who had no chance of death, of living had 25% odds. They said, let's just go over there. And when they get there, there's nobody there. Because God had done something, but nobody knew that God was moving. Again, question for you guys. How often is God doing something, but because we fail to look again, we fail to see that he's moving? Or because we've seen it so long for some way that now we fail to see that God's done something. So they left the camp. They went. So what did the men of leprosy do? Remember, these were the hopeless, right? The men who had leprosy, they reached the edge of the camp. They entered one of the tents, and they ate and they drank. What else would you do? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like, let's go. Let's have a party, just the 4 of us. So then they took silver, gold, and clothes, and they went off and they hid them. They returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid them also. Then they said to each other, what we're doing is not right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. How many of you guys understand that when God does something in your life, you can't keep it to yourself? You can try for a little while, but at some point that conviction is going to hit you, and you're going to have to share it with somebody else. How many of you guys understand what I'm saying, right? If not, they're going to see, wow, all of a sudden you're blessed. Where you been? Oh, so you hit me up when things were down, but now that things are good, you don't show up? How many of you guys know what I'm talking about? All right. So then they said to each other, what we're doing is not right, so we got to go tell somebody. Verse 10, the clueless. Enter scene, the clueless. So they went and they called out the city gatekeepers and told them that we went into the Aramean camp and no one was there. Not a sound of anyone, only tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents left just as they were. The gatekeepers shouted the news, and it was reported within the palace. The king got up in the night and said to his officers, I will tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we're starving, so they have left the camp to hide in the countryside, thinking that they will surely come out, and then when we take them alive, and then we'll take the city. What was the king's first thought? It's too good to be true. They're trying to trick us. They're trying to call us out. They left it like pretending like they're gone, and the second we come out, they're going to grab us. That's what he's saying. So one of his officers answered, well, have some men take 5 of the horses that are left in the city. There was only 5 horses left in the city. Times were tough. 5 horses left in the whole city. Take 5 of the horses that are left in the city. Their plight will be like that of all the Israelites left here. Yes, they will only be like all the Israelites who are doomed. So let us send them to find out what happened. So they took they took 2 chariots and horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army. He commanded the drivers, go and find out what happened. They followed them, and as far as the Jordan, and they found that the whole road was strewn with the clothing and the equipment the Arameans had thrown away in their headlong flight. So the messengers returned and reported to the king. What did happen? They figured it out. Well, they actually are gone. They've actually disappeared. Our enemies are no longer here. Verse 16. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. So a seah of the finest flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, as the Lord had said. Let me give you context. One day to the next, 5 seeds were going for $60. The next day, a whole 5-gallon bucket of seeds was selling for $6. Do you understand the difference? It's like what was costing you $1,000 yesterday is now only costing you $15 because things came back to normal. How many of you guys understand what I'm saying? Like what you were doubting in your economy, in one day God flipped the whole switch where they're like, I don't have enough for my bills. How am I going to make this happen? God can flip it just that quickly. Okay? But the city, they had no clue what was going on. They were the clueless ones. Okay? Now it goes on to say, I'm going to skip this for time's sake, but remember the doubting officer, the one that says, could this even happen? Turns out they stationed him by the gate, and when all the people came running back after excitement, they trampled him, he died. End of story. I mean, there's a lesson behind there, but I'm not going to go too deep, just in case you're one of the doubters. I'll leave it at that. All right, so we're going to leave it at that. All right, so here's the next part of where I'm at. If I get my notes back and working again. So the situation was rough. How many of you guys understand that? Right? It was rough. Give me my phone, Kizzy, if you would. The situation was real rough. We had 3 parties here, right? We had the doubters, we had the hopeless, and we had the clueless. Did we not? That's what we're looking at in this situation. The doubting officer and the blaming king. How many of you guys understand that? And this is where I want you guys to start plugging into the play. The king was responsible for the entire people. Okay? We might be responsible for our families, those that we love. If you're a business person, for your business. And when things are not going wrong, we feel the weight of that burden. Yes or no? Has anybody ever felt the weight of the burden for a family or for a business or something like that? And when you feel the weight of the burden, the easy thing to do sometimes, if you're not in the right mindset, is to blame God. Say, but God, I served you. That's a temptation that we got to be careful not to fall into. You know, what did the king do? He said, why should I even wait on the Lord anymore? I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and everybody is starving. Like, people are coming and telling me they have to sacrifice their kids and stuff. And people are hungry and people are dying. Why should I even wait on God anymore? That's the temptation. If you've ever said that, you need to ask for forgiveness. If you've ever said that, you need to ask for forgiveness, because the easy temptation is to just blame God. We can't do that. Why? Man of God then speaks and he says, relax. Tomorrow, something's going to happen. Can I just say that sometimes it helps us to learn trust and trust godly counsel? You know, my marriage is falling apart. Trust some godly counsel. My business is not working. Well, let's trust some godly counsel. What does God say about this business? What are you doing in your business? Are you cheating and stealing? Well, get out of cheating and stealing, because it's not going to prosper that way. We got to learn to trust godly counsel. Follow some instructions and know that God is still speaking. What about the official that he doubted? He said, even if God wanted to, could it even happen? How many of you guys understand that the official, his doubt was justified? The king's weight and the burden of what he was living was very real. And the official, his doubt was justified. How many of you guys understand what the situation you might be in? You might be justified in your doubt. You might be justified in your burden. But you are not justified in blaming God or not believing. Guess what you got to do? Look again. Are you aware that God is still speaking? God's still got a plan? Look again. Look at the situation again. We need to learn to trust God's ability, God's word, and God's timing. God could have done something earlier. He didn't. Don't know why, but we got to trust that he's going to do it. God could have changed my finances earlier. Don't know why he didn't, but I got to trust his ability to do it. God could have restored my marriage sooner. Don't know why, but I got to trust his ability to do it. How many guys understand what I'm saying? I remember Well, we just saw in this case, Elijah, he had spoken a promise, and then they had to trust it. But they couldn't even trust it because when they found out, when the lepers came back and they reported and they said they're gone, they couldn't even believe it. They had to go figure it out, right? What happened? They're tricking us. They're fooling us. They're about to get us again. No, no, no. I've been down this road before. You get me once, you ain't getting me again. How many of you guys have done it? Now, I've trusted God before. I've trusted Him before. It didn't happen. It must have been because God didn't want it. No. Nobody's trying to trick you. I followed Scripture once, and it didn't work. I'm giving up on my marriage. I'm just saying, guys, there's things we need to learn to trust God's ability, His word, and His timing. So here's the reality. I remember one time in my life, and tell me if you guys ever had to struggle. You ever had to struggle with God's promises for your life versus the reality of your, let's say, your bills? You ever been there? I remember God's given me promises in my financial area of my life, and I remember having the nicest house on the block. But I also remember in the same season, although we had the nicest house on the block, all of a sudden we hit a season where we're back on food stamps, back on WIC. How many guys know what WIC is? You ain't in a situation unless you know what WIC is. You understand? For all those that don't know, don't worry, you've been blessed. Okay? But we were in a situation where even with the titles, even with the degrees, we had to rely on the food stamps. But there's this thing that goes on in our heads. We got promises of God, but our reality says one thing. Are you going to trust that God can still do what He said, even though you don't see it? How many of you guys understand? You don't need faith if you can see it. Period. We got to trust His ability to do something. Now, we got the other people, the lepers. How many of you guys have said it was pretty bad for them? They were sick, they were isolated, and they were hungry. 25%, I can't even speak this morning. 25% chance to live, 75% certainty that they're going to die, okay? And they looked again at their situation. Let me put it this way. We need to learn to look again at our situation because your worst situation might be your best opportunity. Your worst situation might be your best opportunity. Does that make sense? Your worst situation might be your best opportunity. They had nothing left to lose. It's like, what else are we going to do? What else are we going to do? Let's just go. You guys have heard these phrases, or at least you've heard this one. You guys have heard the phrase that necessity is the mother of all invention? You heard that phrase? When you actually have a need, you got to figure something out. Look again. If you find yourself in a place of need, get it together. Look again. Figure it out. If you've got promises for your business, look again at your business. Reassess the business. Am I not handling my finances right? Or am I selling the wrong product? Or am I selling it to the wrong people? Figure it out. What are you doing? Look again at the situation. I mean, Pastor, I'm flat broke. Well, I remember back in 2005 to 2008, you guys remember the real estate bubble? Help me out with something back there. You guys remember the real estate bubble? Okay, I'm a real estate attorney. The first ones that went broke during that time was myself. Not even the realtors, because they still had contracts underway. You understand? And so when we went flat broke, I just started my business, but God had told me at that time, start your business. And the second I start my business, all of a sudden the market changes. What am I supposed to do? Stop doubting? Start doubting? No. I had to figure out another way. Had to flip the script, had to look for the opportunity. My worst scenario became my best opportunity because then all of a sudden there was a need for defense of people's homes, to help people with their financial situations. We have to look again at the situation. Here's the thing, though, that I found real interesting about the lepers. They really, again, they were sick, isolated, and hungry. They had a choice. They could have stayed there and died, or they could have done something and lived. Likelihood, they're going to die. Let me understand, if you stay where you're at, it's going to sound rough, but you need to hear me. If you stay where you're at in the situation that you're dealing with, there's a likelihood that you will die in that situation. And I'm not saying a physical death, but you lose purpose in life. You lose motivation in life. You get discouraged. You understand? I truly believe, as I was meditating on this, I truly believe that the lepers were in this situation for a reason. I believe that God had taken away everything from them so that they would be bold enough to do something. Because when we can separate from certain things that have got us distracted, we can focus on the things we need to do. We need to look again. How many of you guys have been so distracted that you've not acted? You know what God's telling you to do. But I'll say it again. You've been so distracted in all the things that don't matter that you've not acted in the things that you know you need to act upon. Distraction leads to inaction. And sometimes we need to separate from all the unnecessary things, focus on seeking and moving in God's desired directions. Sometimes God will remove things to improve things. So when something disappears, oh man, I'm like feeling all rhymey today. When something disappears, something's about to appear. Did you get it? Guys, we want to hold on to things so bad because, but God gave it to me. Did he really? Maybe he did. But maybe it's the source of your disconnect from him today. Maybe it's the source of your distraction. Maybe because you're so focused on the thing that he gave you, you're losing out on what he's trying to get you next. Am I making myself clear? We got to look again, guys. I'll say it again. Sometimes God will remove things to improve things. Let's not be afraid of what God wants to take out of our lives. Let it go. Let it go. But look again at what is in your life. And then the clue list. This is so funny because all of us fall into a situation at some point or another. The clue list. Who was the clue list? The clue list was the entire city. Nobody knew that the Aramean army had already gone away. Nobody knew that God caused them to hear chariots and other armies, and they got scared, and they ran, running. They left it all behind. They left their gold. They left their silver. They left their food. They're like, we out. But nobody knew. They were clueless. They were in their own little cities, hunkered down. They had gotten so accustomed to their lifestyle of poverty. They got so accustomed of God not doing anything. How many days did they pray? How many did they fast? I mean, they were forcefully fasting because they were hungry anyway. But how many days did they fast? How many days did they look to the heavens and say, God, when are you going to do something? And they got so used to being distracted that they stopped believing that God could do something. And they were just plain out clueless. Look again, because something in your life may have already shifted and you might have missed it. Look again. I got to tell you this because I mean it from the bottom of my heart. We can never settle for mediocrity if something is less than ideal. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, it might not look the way it's supposed to look, but don't settle because you don't think there's nothing else. Look again. They were clueless. They could have stayed in their own comfortable place and just, we'll just die. We're good. Look again. Maybe a position opened up at the workplace that you're working at. And you didn't realize it because you were so focused on complaining that you don't like the job that you're in. Maybe you own a business and maybe a competitor closed up. But because you're so focused on worrying about your own financial situation, you didn't realize now there's an opportunity that just opened up because a competitor just closed up. The army left. Now all their stuff was available to them, and immediately the next day, their economies changed. Their lives changed because they took a second look. Maybe the heart of the one you love has shifted back in your direction because God did something in them. You understand? But you want to throw in the towel, but you missed the fact that God shifted something. Look again. You want to know what he's doing? Look again. Look at it and move in accordance with your current situation. If we fail to realize, guys, what's going on, we'll miss out what God's doing. Look again. What is the area in your life that you got to look again at something? That's what we need to do. Amen? We sang it. We sang it opening the worship. We said it. Where it says that he's not man, that he should lie. Help me out. How's the song go? Because I'm terrible with lyrics. My wife tells me every single time. You know what? I think because she tells me every single time that's why I'm actually terrible with lyrics. I just had a revelation. If my wife said, you know what, you're good with lyrics, you know what I'm going to be? I'm going to be good with lyrics. Oh, man. I'm looking again at the situation. Hold on a second here. The problem was not mine all along. The problem was not mine all along. But how's the song? If you said it, we believe it. The man of God said it, but nobody was trying to believe it. Which one are you? The doubter, the hopeless, or the clueless? If you're doubter, you got to believe. If you're the hopeless, you better look again. Guess what? God's the giver of hope. And if you're the clueless, you better look again and figure something out.